Hello and welcome to another MovieBoozer.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and Hawk Ripjaw's with me today.
Hello.
And we've got a couple things to talk about this week. We're going to go ahead and roll the new releases from last week into next week's discussion because I think it's going to be kind of a scattershot thing next week of who actually makes it out to see any movie. I mean, there's some that, of course, I'm gonna see Hurricane Heist, and I'm sure. I mean, you obviously have a lot on the line for that one.
Yes, I'm reviewing it. I have taken my lumps in terms of getting it to review. So it's I've been looking forward to this movie since the title got announced.
But the
So
other releases this weekend are mixed, so we're just gonna combine 2 weeks into it, and that'll probably make a decent episode next week.
of course next week we'll also be able to discuss Jessica Jones season 2 because that comes out tomorrow.
Oh God, I I don't know if I'll have time to actually watch it next week, but
I, yeah, we'll see.
yeah, depend. We'll take a look at that. That said, the Academy Awards were this weekend, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some films that maybe were a little overlooked in the year. So, first of all, though, what was your overall impression of the ceremony? Did you think it was more entertaining than not, or less entertaining
Um,
than more, or
I I think it was less interesting for sure. I don't think there was as much energy in there because I think they were all very careful about being politically correct, which is
yes,
fine. I mean, I'm gonna come right out and say it. I think that the part where they were talking about diversity in films got to the point where I just was thinking, well, fuck me for being a white guy, which
wow.
I know wasn't the intended purpose. I think it's awesome that 2017 saw a massive uptick in more diversity in films from skin color to gender. I thought that was really neat.
I was actually doing the math because I read an article that was saying, "Oh, Oscars are actually still so white," and I winced a little bit of that because I was like, "Wait a second, you have Shape of Water by a Mexican director, which won 4 awards. You have, I mean, yes, the acting category this year was certainly for white people. That's not debatable. I understand that. But you have original screenplay by a black guy. You have um, Coco, which uh, is a film uh, containing almost exclusively Latin American cast,
Mm.
Mexican American specifically. You have A Fantastic Woman winning a Spanish foreign language film. Of course, it's foreign language, you know. But then you have that was a Chilean film. I'm sorry. Uh, then you have outside of that, if you really want to expand things, Dear Basketball, uh, that Kobe Bryant, you know, that's I would call diversity. You have I'm actually just going to go down the list here and quickly summarize what else was there. The as for, well, you know what, that kind of honestly that caps off the main things. But then you do have the things I would say should count to an extent. In that, Call Me by Your Name is a movie that is very diverse in its own way because it's about it's a movie that involves a homosexual relationship, and the way it's depicted in the film is not at all exploitive. It's progressive in that respect.
Also want to point out that in the last 5 years, four of the best director winners uh, were Mexican. It's Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro Iñárritu in 2014 and 2015, and then Guillermo this year.
Right. And so I mean, I will say, if you do the act, if you crush the hard numbers, yes, more white people did technically win an individual award this year. But you also have to, and this is just a hard fact, you have to consider the percentage of people in this country, and the fact that they're just it, it hasn't tipped that way yet. it's headed in that direction. In fact, they expected within, I think they said within, geez, the statistic I'm coming up with off the top of my head was from high school. So that was
So maybe we're there already.
over a decade ago. The prediction was something like around 50 years from now, the majority would actually be Spanish, or not Spanish speaking, but those of Latin American descent or Central American descent.
Yeah, but that's fine, and I think part of the Oscars so white was the fact that the nominees were predominantly Caucasian, with like uh, a couple of different skin colors mixed in there. So I think the movement has a little bit of traction, but I think the Oscars so white is a little bit unfair, even to the point where it's kind of pushed forward as a joke rather than an actual political issue.
Right. At this point, I think that's really all that needs to be said on the matter, because this year was far from controversial in that respect. And actually, it's a year far from controversial in most respects.
I would almost call it irritatingly safe.
Well, as far as the actual wins, I wouldn't say that, because, I mean, when it's voted on, you wouldn't call it safe. And I would argue the best film, for the first time in a long time, in my opinion, best film of the year won Best Picture and won the most awards, and that was The Shape of Water. I don't agree with the Best Picture win, like, as a person from personal preference very often. So I have to admit I was very satisfied by that. I've been waiting for Guillermo del Toro to get his due since Pan's Labyrinth, which is I still consider his absolute masterpiece. This comes very close for me, with maybe Kronos and the Devil's Backbone following close behind that.
I am
Kronos.
What?
Have you seen Kronos?
Yeah, Kronos is great.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes, Kronos was my third Guillermo del Toro movie after the two Hellboys and Pan's Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm. You've seen Devil's Backbone as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure, because those fantastic.
I've also seen Mimic.
Yeah, Mimic. It's not terrible. But then I would also say that neither was his last movie. What was it? I can't remember. Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak was
not terrible.
Crimson Peak was sorely disadvantaged by its marketing.
Yeah, and but the thing is, if they had marketed it as a as an Emily Bronte style costume drama, no one would have seen it.
Well, nobody saw it anyway, so
so it failed both. In both.
So as far as that's fine. Like Shape of Water was good. I really liked it, but it was only 9th or 8th on my list of the year, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. A couple of times throughout making my list, I almost considered putting in a disclaimer saying, you know what, fuck it, this is not an ordered list. They're all really good movies, because that's how good it was. Just other films were more to my taste, I would say, or spoke to me more. Because the older I get, which is a horrifying thing to say, the older I get, the more I really give this credence to movies that really make me feel something. And everything that I put ahead of The Shape of Water really made me feel something, whether it was fear or happiness or whatever. But I still can't deny the fact that The Shape of Water was really good. I am glad that Roger Deakins finally got his fucking cinematography Oscar.
Yeah,
I was really scared that Hoyt van Hoytema, bless him, was going to get it, which good for him if he did. But 14 nominations with no wins would just have been a crime for Deakins.
Yeah, I mean he had it coming, and the cinematography in Blade Runner 2049 is undoubtedly some of the best of the year. And honestly, the other films competing against it were solid too. But yeah, the Oscars tend to give people their due eventually if they put their time in. It's true for everyone, but for a lot of people, I would say.
I think it just bears mentioning that this, for many of the categories this year, was absolutely stacked. Like so many of these categories, I would have been mostly okay with almost anybody winning because, everybody did a great job in all of these nominees for the most part.
There were no nominations that I would say are in fact, looking through each individual award for Best Picture, I think everything nominated there deserves to be there. Yes, if I wanted to, split hairs, I could probably substitute one for another film, but I can't dispute it being on this list. Same for director. Some people had a problem with Denzel Washington being in the Best Actor category, but I contend the Roman J. Israel Esquire, while a deeply flawed movie, is one of his best personal performances.
Yeah, I mean, yes, Roman J. Israel has a lot of problems, but that is still an Oscar caliber performance.
Absolutely.
What are some other movies that have had really great performances in otherwise mediocre movies?
Jumping at me, I would argue that, well, some people would argue with me on this, but I think Gangs of New York is a deeply flawed movie, an uneven movie, and I think Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in it is phenomenal.
Yes, I think Daniel Day-Lewis is the reason people call that a good movie.
Yes, I would say everything involving. Is it Cameron Diaz?
Yeah, it's Cameron Diaz.
Oh God, she is awful in that movie, and also a waste of time.
It's what?
Yeah, it's such a her subplot in that movie is there literally to have a female character in the movie. That's the only purpose. They don't give her anything to do other than be the woman.
Yes,
and it's really it should be offending to women really because of how completely pointless it is. Now that said, let's see other movies that are imperfect that have solid performances. Jeez,
I can't even think of one.
I'd have to give it more.
Yeah, maybe not on the spot, but we'll come up with something later and maybe post it somewhere. But
yeah,
I have a bone to pick. The Oscars several years ago expanded the Best Picture slate to 10 films.
Yes.
This year, 9 films were nominated, and one of those films that was not nominated was The Florida Project.
Oh yes.
You had another slot that you could have put it in there.
So they technically could go up to 10, but it's that stupid way they figure the Best Picture category these days. That is it's convoluted and not particularly easy to understand. The term they use for it is preferential voting. It's also known as instant runoff voting, and it's kind of confusing. Basically, to explain, I actually looked up a definition here. It's used in single seat votes with more than 2 candidates. Instead of voting only for a single candidate, voters can rank the candidates in order of preference, and ballots are counted for each top choice. Losing candidates are eliminated. Ballots for losing candidates are redistributed until one candidate is the top remaining choice. The effect of this is interesting in that with some split votes, it can potentially lead into someone who technically was in second place getting the win. The rules are confusing in this, but
I haven't seen the post, but I'm slightly fussed by this notion that I think certain people are getting nominations just because they are this certain person.
You're talking about Steven Spielberg, of course.
Spielberg and Meryl Streep.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think The Post is a perfectly solid movie, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think Spielberg's direction is solid. I think that Meryl Streep is solid in the movie. I'm using the word solid because
yes.
Because here's the thing. This is The Post to me is this year's and it shows that we've departed a little bit because Spotlight was that for me. Spotlight is a solid movie that is, in my opinion, lacking in an overall emotional impact, despite the fact that it deals with a really heavy material and meaty material. It never rises, in my opinion, above just, being
I think
ideally a Best Picture nominee should be a film that moves filmmaking forward in some way.
Yeah, I think Spotlight was that. I mean, that year that Spotlight came out, that the subject was really a hot topic, and I think in hindsight, I agree that it's a very solid movie, if slightly unremarkable, but with very good performances. I think when I first saw it, I had a knee-jerk reaction since I'm Catholic, and that happened, in Catholic churches and stuff. That was kind of a really savage thing, a wake-up call, I guess, of like this is a really big deal. Especially, like, I completely lost it at the end when it just had several cards of just all the churches where priests had been convicted of molesting young boys, and that was a really hard emotional thing to have to see, and realizing that. But in hindsight, it's like, yeah, the Spotlight was a really good movie, but was it really a Best Picture?
Did you ever see Call Me Lucky?
No, that's the one with
Barry Crimmins, who recently passed away.
No, I did not see that.
It was Bobcat Goldthwait's documentary about the comedian Barry Crimmins. I mentioned that because you're talking about a film that hits close to home in terms of that. Crimmins, he, not to go into too much detail, but he had an experience of basically. I hear some music playing. It's nice and nice commercial break here.
Keep talking.
And he mutes his microphone. So, as I was saying, Call Me Lucky is it's a movie that deals with sexual assault and just straight up rape in a very serious and earnest way. And Crimmins is was a take no prisoners political activist, in that one thing that he constantly did was go up against the Catholic Church for their own offenses. Something he used to do all the time was constantly tweet the Pope, begging the Pope to excommunicate him. And the reason why he was asking for that is he believed that in his heart that the organization was corrupt from within, and therefore any opinion they have on on heaven and who gets to go there is automatically pointless. And so the movie has it hits some very heavy emotional pieces based on Crimmins' own story and his experiences and what he had done since then to protect other people from the same thing.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that.
Yeah. And anyway, I just thought I'd mention that since you said Spotlight deals with it too.
Sure.
But
now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. In contrast to The Post, which again I have not seen, it just seems like one of those movies that, even if it's great, it's fucking. I know you described the runoff voting, whatever the fuck it's called.
Preferential voting.
They still had that 10th category that they. could have given us something. In any case, The Florida Project, it was my favorite film of the year, and it is a movie that I have watched a couple times since then, and even thinking about it makes me feel like really kind of it's a film that gives a lot of feelings in a lot of different ways. It's happy, and it's really devastating and heartbreaking and kind of hopeful, and just so beautiful. It's a movie that makes me feel so much that I want to just stop feeling for a second.
And I think that that's a good segue into our honorable mentions of the year, because that movie, I would agree with you, is probably the most overlooked. Yes, it did get nominated for Best Actor. I hate to say it, but for Best Supporting Actor rather. But Willem Dafoe chose the wrong year to make his bid for Best Supporting Actor again.
to get an Oscar, yeah. And Willem Dafoe was I don't want to put it like this, but I will. Willem Dafoe was quote unquote the worst actor out of the main cast.
Oh, I
in the Florida Project.
You're being what's the word? That's not even true. The other actors in the Florida Project, I would say, give performances that are more memorable, simply because, as essentially non-actors, the realism that they evoke and what the director was able to get out of them feels so hardcore. I think Willem Dafoe's performance in the film is excellent in its own way. It's just his job was to play the father figure that all of these if functionally homeless people have never had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I mean, Willem Dafoe was great, and he totally deserved an Oscar nomination. I'm just more a little bit salty that Brooklyn Prince did not get nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah, that things like that only seem to happen for high-profile roles. The kid or the non-actor will only get nominated if it was like a big-budget movie or something like that.
Yeah, which is I hope to see that trend. I want next year. I'm going to do hashtag Oscars so old. But I think that was a role that was really deserving of a nomination, at least, because again, you mentioned the realism of the performances the director can get out of it. But I think Brooklyn Prince's performance was it was naturalistic because she's a 6-year-old acting like a 6-year-old. But I think that it worked so well in the film, like that she definitely was, especially at the end when she was crying,
I would have definitely given her preference over Meryl Streep this year. As good as her performance is in The Post, it is not. It's not a life-changing performance for Streep, and something Streep has written. She's written herself into a corner being such a great actress, in that a decent Streep performance, which is, by the way, a decent Streep performance, is better than a ton of other actresses' best days. But a decent Streep performance just doesn't have the impact, because when she really reaches it, it's even more noticeable. So, yeah, needless to say, I will defer that Florida Project could have gotten an actor nom there. I would say, actually, another thing I would have given the Florida Project is, I think, Best Director, because wrangling these non-actors and getting the solid performances out of them, and how visually interesting this film is, despite its incredibly low budget. Quite a coup.
I mean, maybe even cinematography, just with the ingenuity that they had with some of the shots. Maybe not given the other nominees, but yeah, I would totally put my hat in for Best Director for Sean Baker.
I will say one more. The only category that I truly disagree with in terms of winning this year. When I say disagree with, all I mean is this film just shouldn't have even been there by comparison, is for animated short. The film that won is Dear Basketball, Kobe Bryant's movie. and animated by Glenn Keane, who is a very well-known and reputable animator. But the problem is, all it is sketch drawing animation set to Kobe Bryant talking about how much he loves basketball.
Right.
Is an ESPN interstitial short at best.
Right.
Yes, admittedly, I don't give a flying fuck about basketball, so that may color my opinion to an extent. But that said, I have seen films that deal with a subject matter that I'm not a fan of. A sport, for instance, that I'm not a fan of. That I don't give a fuck about the bobsled, but Cool Runnings is an entertaining ass movie. On the other hand, you have Revolting Rhymes, which is a awesome, hilarious interpretation of a few short stories from Roald Dahl. You have Negative Space, which is understated but kind of pretty in its own way. It manages to hold your attention for 5 minutes while this person waxes philosophically about how the one thing he and his dad had in common was the ability to pack a bag.
Right.
And then you have Lou, and Lou is the Pixar short, and it tugs your heartstring. It has its typical twist near the end that makes you feel empathetic for someone who you wouldn't normally. And then you have the absolute masterpiece of the short animated films nominated, Garden Party. Now, have you seen any of these shorts?
No, but Garden Party is a stop motion one, right?
No, it's CG animation, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to give anything away with Garden Party, because I absolutely want you to see it.
All right.
The Garden Party, needless to say, first of all, it's beautifully animated, and second, it has an ending to it that is just a masterful twist that you don't see coming.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I think the shorts are still playing near me, so I'll have to check them out.
Yes, if you have an opportunity to, yeah. Anyway, so that said, that's all I have to say as far as the Oscars. But some of my honorable mentions, because we talked about Florida Project.
That wasn't on your list, right? That was an honorable mention for you.
Well, it was Florida Project was definitely one of my favorite films of the year.
I just can't remember if it was on your top 10 list.
It made my top 10 list.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just, since you mentioned it as something that the Oscars ignored, I had to bring it up. Brawl in Cell Block 99. That's my first honorable mention I'm going to talk about.
Okay, that was my number 10 of the year.
Yes. What can be said about this? This movie is one of the most sharply written grindhouse movies ever made.
Yes, I would agree with that.
It's sharp. All I have to say is S. Craig Zahler has this uncanny knack for writing Quentin Tarantino level, just brilliantly clever dialogue, and wrapping it into a movie that, much like Tarantino, has these exploitative elements with it. But unlike Tarantino, he takes himself seriously. Tarantino lately, especially, his films have a degree of comedy to them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Where it's like he knows that what he's doing is over the top, and isn't this funny because this is like something you would see in this movie. He takes this shit seriously, and the whole premise behind Brawl in Cell Block 99 is about a down on his luck ex-criminal who's trying to make good, finds out that he really can't make good anymore, so he briefly flirts with going going back to crime, and that lands him in prison and in increasingly violent situations.
I thoroughly encourage you to get a few friends together that have not seen this movie and watch it with them, because I did that and it was lots of fun just to because when these major gore effects are coming, and to gauge the reactions to them is what part of the reason that I put it on my top 10 of the year, because not only is it a great movie with really fantastically written dialogue, watching it with people that haven't seen it before is one of the most entertaining things of the year.
Yes. Something I learned, I even learned a medical term from reading just the Wikipedia entry of this film. I learned what degloving is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that happens in this movie. Um, there's eye gouging, there's skull stomping,
There's arm snapping.
and that's just start.
There's the bonus round from Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, beating up a car.
Beating up a car.
Yeah, this movie's awesome. So what's your honorable mention? Numero uno.
Snowy Bing Bongs across the North Star Combat Zone.
You've spoken about this film a couple times, so just summarize your thoughts on it.
Well, it's on YouTube right now. I would have loved to see this submitted as a best short. It's only 40 minutes. It is a really weird movie. Which is probably why it didn't make it to the Oscars. It's presented, not really involved at all, by Daniels, the guys that did Swiss Army Man.
Oh, okay. When you said Daniels, I was like, Lee Daniels?
No. The two guys that are named, it's both of them have the surname Daniel. So as a directing team, they are formally known as Daniels.
Gotcha.
It's about a dance troupe. Well, it stars a dance troupe from, I believe, New York, and this movie is a series of vignettes and skits of this and that. Some of it is a send up of like acting as a profession or theater as a profession. One of the funniest segments is the one at the very beginning, where the three of them are in bikinis and lounging on a beach, although it's still a stage. Everything takes place on a stage for the most part. And it's kind of a weird deconstruction of the male gaze in terms of femininity and womanhood, because it's a lot of, every time, like at one point, all three of the girls turn over and each of them emits a very, very loud fart sound. And it's not gross, but it's not like the movie kind of pulls away from the, hey, look at the sexy girls in the bikinis. And it also has a lot of breaking of the fourth wall. In the middle of one of the segments, the lights come up and all three of the girls sit on each other's laps and start answering questions from the audience. And it's clear they're all very uncomfortable. Just they're sitting on each other's laps. It's a stupid position to be in. But they're answering really dumb questions from the audience. It's just a really wacky movie and really, really funny.
All right. So another movie I want to put in my honorable mention is Professor Marsden and the Wonder Women.
Which I didn't see, but I wanted to, and I know you talked about that and mentioned a lot of what made it so good.
Yes. What made this movie so good, in my opinion, is the way it talks about. First of all, it's one of those too crazy to be false stories, where it's just like, this is just like the fact that this happened, and this is how one of the most famous characters in comic books became a thing, is fascinating. And I would compare it to movies like, say, The Secretary, where it's just a very earnest telling of this kind of unusual relationship.
Yeah, because because part of the whole thing with Wonder Woman as a character and her lasso being a pretty obvious BDSM allegory had to do with Marston's own proclivities with his wife and the girl that was representing Wonder Woman, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was all about that, and yet, even though BDSM was heavily figured into it, it was also at the time considered to be very liberating in that respect, because she was the one who controlled that, which is, I mean, you can decipher it and psychoanalyze it all you want, but whatever works for them. Also, the movie is probably the first movie I've ever seen that insinuates that a three-way relationship can operate on pure love between all three individuals involved.
Oh yeah, totally can.
Which I don't know of any movies off the top of my head that didn't end in like a permanent breakup between them. What ends up tearing apart the people in this relationship is it's only a temporary setback that is reconciled once once circumstances are repaired, and it's handled in a very realistic and believable way. But can you think of any other movies that do that?
Let me think. No.
Yeah. It'd be like
I'll come up with something. It'd be like the good performances in bad movies. Like we'll come up with something and talk about it later.
Yeah. It'd be like if the end of Chasing Amy was just Ben Affleck, Jason Lee, and oh shoot, I forget her name. Just going, oh.
Chasing Amy is a movie that I am afraid to rewatch.
Yeah, well, it's a movie that at the time felt very progressive.
Yes,
it's interesting because it's fun to compare this, because there's a lot of movies from like the first half of the 20th century that at the time were huge steps forward in some ways, but by today's standards look just awful.
Right. I'm going to rewatch it now and be like, wow, I was a fucking dumbass for loving this so much when I was younger.
I'm going to give you a perfect example that's, an extreme is any Jack Benny movie featuring Rochester. Because Rochester during that time was actually a hugely progressive character, because he was, first of all, smarter than Jack Benny. He always knew what was up. He knew something was wrong, and Benny was completely clueless to it, and he was always telling him. But the thing is, he's a character of servitude under Jack Benny.
Yeah.
He's got that voice that has become in many ways synonymous with servitude. And his manner of speech, it was very heavily stereotyped, and so by today's standards, it doesn't look good. And in fact, the actor who played Rochester reportedly maintained his friendship with Benny to the very end, and Rochester was one of the first black millionaires in show business.
Mm-hmm.
And Benny made sure he was taken care of, in a time when that was not very common. And so, if you examine the context of that, you would call it progressive, but by today's standards, it can be uncomfortable.
Right.
Honestly, you could even make that argument about Song of the South, simply because at the time, yeah, I mean, now this is even more controversial, because at the time, even then, some people were saying that this is problematic, but there were elements of it that were a step forward.
Yeah.
And Professor Marsden in many ways feels like something that, who knows, that kind of reflects the times that it was set in. And I don't think it's a movie that, because it's a period piece, it's always going to be perceived from that context. But yeah, Chasing Amy, you're right. I even own it on DVD, and I'm afraid to pull that out and put it back in my player.
Right.
Anyway, my next, or wait, no, I'm sorry, it's your turn. Go ahead.
I would have to say Marjorie Prime.
Aha.
Did you see this one?
I didn't see that. No.
It's a movie about, if your loved one dies, you can upload them into a upload their consciousness, well, not really their personality, into a hologram, and this hologram kind of learns as it goes and continues to become more like the person that you used to love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great. It feels like a stage play, and I don't know for sure. I could look it up later, but you could tell me that it was a stage play, and I'd believe you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting with just kind of the dialogue and everything is really, really good. It's a lot of character development just based on dialogue. I don't have much to say about it other than that I thought it was a very well made film and very well written.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Bill Arsenault was talking about it, he was giving it a lot of really high praise. And at the ending, it has a bunch of holograms of characters in the movie talking to each other. And I think depending on how you look at that situation and that technology, that scene could be considered either hopeful or sinister. I saw it as sinister because my thought was, wow, how fucked up is it that all of our loved ones that have died get uploaded into holograms that will outlive all of us in turn.
Yeah.
And whereas everybody else is like, no, you can see your loved one forever. And my response is, and ever and ever and ever and ever.
Right.
And it's a really good movie. It's got John Hamm, who I really respect as an actor. I'm still hoping he gets his shot as a DC character here pretty soon. People are saying, I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I think he could really do a good Batman. Even every week you get a new report that Ben Affleck's going to be in 5 more movies. It's okay. Or Ben Affleck's looking for a really good way to exit the DC cinematic universe. Like every time you hear about Ben Affleck as Batman, it's a different story that contradicts the last one. Yeah. So if he is on his way out, I liked Ben Affleck as Batman, but John Hamm could be a great old man Bruce Wayne. But he's a good actor, and that's the main reason why I watched Marjorie Prime. But I don't have much else to say about that because I saw it way back in April or even earlier, I think. So I don't remember much of it other than it stuck with me enough to throw onto my list, my short list for the end of the year.
Cool. Yeah, I'll try to make some time for that. This film just barely missed my top 10. There were 4 or 5 movies that I was just juggling with, and Free Fire was one of them.
Free Fire was going to be one of my honorable mentions as well.
Yeah, the thing about Free Fire is it is a solid comedic action movie, and with the cool concept of the film is one big gunfight, and that is so cool, and it's brilliantly choreographed and directed. Performances are hilarious. The only thing that kept it from my top 10 is just that it's one of those things where the movie is what it is, and it didn't rise. You know, as an action movie, I will gladly rewatch it any day if I'm in the mood for an action kick. But it didn't touch my emotional side as much.
Yeah, it's I agree with you completely. It's a great movie, and one of my favorite elements of it was Armie Hammer, who at a certain point just started smoking weed and was just laughing at everything and didn't really care anymore. He got shot like 3 times and barely felt it. And that was one of the funny things about it is that these people are just resilient as all hell to bullets, which I think is actually relatively accurate medically. I mean, if you get shot, yeah, you'll be okay for a little while.
Right. It depends on where you're hit, and the thing is, in a lot of cases, I mean, even if you're hit in the stomach, it's going to hurt like hell. But if you are, say, someone who's hopped up on a lot of drugs, like many characters in this movie tend to be,
or fighting for your life,
or fighting for your life. But one thing that they mention in the movie is like a running joke is the golden 90 minutes, which is not a real thing, but there's a persistent saying about it where if you get a traumatic injury, that there's a period of time where your testosterone hits you and you can force yourself to make it through something that otherwise might be too traumatic.
Yes.
And that movie is just magnificent in its own way. It's just every movie in my top 10 was a movie that struck a chord with me emotionally.
Right. Me too.
And that's why it didn't quite make it. And some people are like, even the devil's candy? Yes.
Yeah, Devil's
Anyway,
Candy is great.
also, yeah, so Free Fire, what's your next one?
Call Me by Your Name.
Ah, yes, that one was also a tough one for me.
Yes. I think that was a movie where it was so good, and then when it came down to the end of the year, I was like, it's like a number 11, maybe. Like it's
I'll
such a good movie. It
we
is.
were just talking about films with an emotional impact, and this film definitely has it. The only thing that kept it from where I reasoned is that for me, the movie was a solid and entertaining film, and and the real emotional hit for me didn't happen until Michael Stolberg's speech at the end.
Right, which was a absolutely incredible delivery. Like, which if it were not for Gary Oldman winning the Best Actor, like Michael Stuhlbarg was he nominated for Best Actor for that role, or was it for
For
something
supporting
else?
actor, no, he wasn't, but he should have.
He should have. Yeah, I think that was. I think regardless of Gary Oldman, I said as misunderstanding who the nominees were, or misremembering rather. But I think were the categories not so stacked this year, Stuhlbarg probably could have gotten in for that one.
Yeah, and then that final scene with him by the fire.
Yes, the ending shot, right, with the
Yeah,
yes, which again, okay, that's the one I was thinking of. Gary Oldman, had he not won Best Actor, Timothy Chalamet might have gotten it for that.
yes.
Which is really that was like it's one of those movies where when you finish it, you kind of just sink into your seat for a second and have to process before you can tell your legs to start working again and get up and move.
Oh yeah, that definitely happened to me in the theater there. I yeah I
I had somewhere to be, so I had to get up and go. But I know what you mean.
mhm.
Um, it's beautifully filmed. The movie made me realize that soft boiled eggs were something that I had never known I would love.
That's
Have you ever had soft boiled eggs?
you know what? Here's the thing with eggs for me. Um, Not a fan of eggs on their own. In fact, that's why I don't have a problem with egg whites because egg whites don't have the yolk, and the yolk for me just the flavor has always been off-putting.
Okay.
If used as a base for like making cookies or cake or whatever, that's fine. It's like I'm not going to turn that out. It's like just straight up scrambled eggs or eggs over easy or boiled egg. Yeah, I will not eat a hard boiled egg. So I've never really tried a soft boiled egg, and I'm not that interested.
For everybody listening, a soft boiled egg is when you let the water boil, like get it a rolling boil, then let it get down to a simmer, drop a couple of eggs in the water, and let it go for about 5 minutes, and then you take them out, pour some cold water over them, and then you do like in the movie where you crack the top of it, and then you basically eat the egg out of the shell. Um, and it's kind of runny like a over easy egg, except you're holding it in the shell. Which I know you would not like, Ken, but it's pretty tasty if you like eggs.
I'm reminded of a movie that taught me something about eggs I didn't know you could do was in the in the Sergio Leone movie Duck You Sucker or Fistful of Dynamite, whatever you want to call it. There's a
Duck You
scene
Sucker is a way better title.
well, actually, the title that it was really supposed to be uh, is the best one, which is Once Upon a Time in the Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
which is the most accurate title. But yeah, Ducky Sucker is a good title. Anyway, it's funny. It's good because it's funny, really, because it's clearly an Italian saying, "Yeah, Americans speak like this."
There's gonna be a sequel to Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah,
Which is actually in canon for the novel that is based on, because the novel actually goes a bit further and has the two characters meeting up later, and it's really sad. But
let me get my egg comment out of the way really quick. So in Duck You Sucker, there's
I'm sorry.
the main villain in the movie. there's this scene where he like taps a tiny hole, like cuts a very tiny hole in the top of an egg, and then just sucks the entire egg through the hole, and like raw. And I was like, wow, you can do that.
Oh yeah, you can totally do that.
Yeah, it taught me something about it. So you were saying, I'm sorry.
There's gonna be a sequel to Call Me by Your Name, which is in canon for the book.
I'm curious how that's gonna work.
Well, in the book, they end up meeting later, and
so this is like a before sunset, before sunrise kind of deal.
kind of less fucking, but it's what is Army Hammer's character's name? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. We'll call him Army Hammer. Elio and Army Hammer meet up later on, and Army he's married with kids, and Elio doesn't want to meet the kids because he still loves Army. And there's a quote that says, oh, now I mentioned the quote and I can't remember what it was. It said something to the effect of, we would call them something. We would call them people we admire, but we wouldn't call them
late for dinner. Yeah.
What?
You said call them people I admire, but I wouldn't call them. And I was like, late for dinner.
It was something like we wouldn't call them missed opportunities or something because that would be too tragic. It was something to the effect of referencing them as people that could have been together, and the quote saying that we don't want to look at it that way because that would just be absolutely heartbreaking.
I just want to say that Miss Opportunity is the most depressing Miss America contestant.
Anyway. So yeah, the sequel to Call Me by Your Name is why I was shitposting in the chat about possible sequel titles. I think that the Call Me by Your Name sequel should follow either the Fast and Furious or Die Hard naming convention.
All right, yeah, that's I can see that.
So like Call Me by Your Name 2, Call Harder.
Exactly. So the next movie on my list of also rans for the year is Logan Lucky.
Oh, Logan Lucky's great.
Yeah. Once again, as far as the emotional impact, it does have one really powerful emotional moment, but it really doesn't fit into the rest of the movie. It's just kind of there because let's have a little girl singing and the father being like, "Oh, I love you," which is fine.
It really did work in.
It did. It's a little manipulative, but it works. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those movies where, like, I actually
went out of his way to find the most aw shucks girl he could possibly find.
Sure, but it kind of brings it all around to the fact that Channing Tatum's character is not trying to get rich or rip off a billionaire or anything like that. Well, he kind of is trying to rip off a billionaire, but it all comes down to
what he's trying to do.
Yeah, but it really also comes down to taking care of his family, which is not something you could say the same for like George Clooney in Ocean's 11 or Sandra Bullock in Ocean's 8.
Oh, totally. This is Steven Soderbergh saying, I realized that the Ocean's movies were kind of vapid when all is said and done. So I'm gonna make a Ocean's movie for the new generation. And sadly, it didn't do as well as it should have. I think it's a wonderful movie, and it's free on Amazon streaming right now. So watch it.
Let me just say, I am so glad that Steven Soderbergh reversed his decision to stop directing feature films.
Yeah.
Because Side Effects and Behind the Candelabra were going to be his final movies.
Not a bad way to go out. They were solid films, but
very solid. I tricked a female friend of mine to go see Side Effects because Channing Tatum was shirtless in the movie, and then he was shirtless in the movie for like literally a second
before he got stabbed.
Yeah, exactly. And I got this really, really great Steven Soderbergh thriller, and she got a second and a half of Channing Tatum.
Oh, that is cruel.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't know it would be that little of Channing Tatum. I was like, yeah, Channing Tatum probably gets shirtless a bunch of times, and whatever, I can deal with that. He's cool. He's a pretty good looking guy. He's a really good looking guy, and I could see this side up for myself. And then she ended up not getting that, and we don't talk anymore. But
I'm curious because Soderbergh's new movie Unsane is coming out pretty soon.
does it have Channing Tatum?
It has Claire Foy, Jay Farrow. Let's see, who is this? Joshua Leo. Joshua Leonard. Okay.
I'm pretty excited for Unsane. I mean, I'm excited for anything Steven Soderbergh makes. Even the movies that aren't as good are still really good.
I haven't heard anything about Unsane, so I can't say.
It's like a horror movie, horror thriller.
Either
Which I love that he continues to almost completely enter a new genre every new movie he makes.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do the same movie twice unless it's an Ocean's film.
Yeah, exactly.
And in that case, that was to fund his other projects. And I still maintain, by the way, that his most underrated film, honestly, is Haywire.
Haywire's really cool.
It is one of the best action movies of the last decade, and nobody's heard of it.
I wouldn't say it's one of the best actions of the last decade.
Oh, no, I say that. Have you rewatched it since it came out?
I've watched it like 3 times, but I will say it is a lot better of an action film than most action movies from directors of dramas usually turn out. Cough, cough, Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: it has, in my opinion, the most wonderfully understated ending of any action movie I've seen recently.
The ending is where she beats the fuck out of that guy on the beach, right?
Well, the ending of Haywire is because through the whole film, Antonio Banderas' character is sort of the villain behind the villains, and she shows up. Antonio Banderas sees her, and in one look, he looks at her, and you see him realizing how fucked he is, and he just goes, "Oh," cut to credits.
Oh, that's the scene that inspired John Wick.
Yeah,
line.
I would argue, honestly, that Haywire was John Wick before John Wick.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, another. So Logan Lucky is a movie that I recommend. What's your next honorable mention?
Wind River.
Yes, I need to rewatch it because I know it's on Amazon free again, and
it's on Netflix.
Netflix. I'm sorry.
I rewatched it on Monday, and it's still really good. I watched it with my roommates, and all of them really liked it too, which is great because, like Logan Lucky, actually backtracking a bit, when I watch movies with my roommates, our tastes on films don't really align unless the movie is a quote unquote objectively good movie. They'll watch whatever, like, oh, this movie has a cool looking poster, let's watch it, and it's fucking god awful piece of shit.
Yeah.
And then movies that I like, they're like, okay, that was kind of boring. But then Logan Lucky and Wind River was like, wow, that was really good. And one of the best scenes in Wind River is a little bit past the halfway mark, probably closer to the 2/3 mark, is when they go to that trailer park. And it's the "Are you flanking me?" scene where the guys that are guarding the trailer park are moving around in such a way that the police officers under the reservation's jurisdiction are getting nervous at the way they're positioning themselves. And it turns into this very, very tense scene of you really don't know what's going on at all. And then there's an explosion of violence, and it's such an awesome stretch of film. And it's you don't often get a really, really tightly constructed thriller along with a very emotional and resonating theme, but Wind River balanced both of those incredibly well.
Yes, absolutely. That was also a movie that was just so. It was so hard for me to exclude from my list.
Yeah.
I know that you needed to cut things a little short today, so I'll go ahead and maybe we should do one more round.
Yeah, I've got a little more time, so it's all right. How many more honorable mentions have you got?
Well, a couple of them are movies that you've already spoken about, so okay. I really only have 2 left.
All right, we'll do two each more.
And actually, we already talked about The Post, so yeah.
that was one of your honorable mentions.
Yeah, because it was a really solid movie. It just didn't quite make top 10 material. You know what
I'm just laughing because earlier I was like, "Rah, fuck that movie," and it ended up being one of your honorable mentions. So I was shitting all over it,
This
and
movie
you
is
had good things to say.
and another movie that isn't on my top 10, but just because friggin' they waited so long to release it, was The Breadwinner. Honestly, The Breadwinner is in my top 5 for sure this year.
Oh, wow. All right.
So that's not really a yeah. Phantom Thread didn't make my top 10, but I really, really love that movie.
I liked Phantom Thread a lot. I think I said this to my friend when we watched it. I see movies with this one specific friend really, really often at the end, where I was like, "Oh, what'd you think?" And we almost always agree almost perfectly on movies, which is really weird. But at the end, we're like, "Oh, it was pretty good." I think I respected what the Phantom Thread was doing on technical and directorial and acting and writing levels more than I actually appreciated the story it was telling.
And that's fair enough. I'm not going to argue with that. I can understand how the movie might be less impactful to some. I think the technical aspects of it were really more than enough for me to overcome that, and the really fucked up nature of that relationship, I found it impressive because he managed to make it understated but still deeply sadistic.
And that's the origin of that storyline, right?
Well, go ahead. I'm not sure if
P.T. Anderson was really, really sick, and his wife was taking care of him, and like really like, no, you can't do this. You need to stay in bed. And he's like, wow, that's pretty fucking hot. And then he wrote the movie. Not quite that brief, but that was the gist of it. Was he was incredibly sick in the same way that Woodcock was in the Phantom Thread, and he wanted to make a movie a little darker, of course, on that same kind of dynamic.
Yeah. Where it's like, I'll nurse you back to health, and that, and it's like that's when they're at their closest. And
yes, he felt this rush of his wife being a little more controlling in her care for him.
God, yeah, that's crazy.
It's great.
That's literally insane.
It's so great.
Okay, and the last one that I'll mention, and then if you have any you want to get out there, we'll move to that, is Hostiles.
Which I didn't see, and I really want to because I love Christian Bale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hostiles, second best Western of the year as far as I'm concerned. And the first was in my top 10 list, which was the Ballad of Lefty Brown.
Yeah.
And but Hostiles is just, it's an excellently paced, dark, gloomy Western with excellent cinematography, killer subdued score, just amazingly nihilistic in in its tone. And
I like nihilism, so I'll have to watch that for sure.
And the performances are really really wonderful. The only thing that kept it from that is, unfortunately, I have to say there have been a lot of Westerns of this kind out there that I would say do it a little bit better.
Okay.
It's like Unforgiven is a perfect template example of a very nihilistic Western that, is about these people who their time is just about up, and they have to come to terms with that fact while at the same time getting the job done one last time.
Yeah.
Have you seen Unforgiven?
What?
You've seen Unforgiven, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay, good. You were saying?
Oh, I have a weird thing about Scott Cooper where I think he falls just barely short of making a really, really great movie.
I'm going to go ahead and maintain that Crazy Heart is a great movie. I would
say Crazy. I guess Crazy Heart excluded, but Out of the Furnace was not quite amazing. Black Mass was not quite awesome.
Right.
I think I don't know what it is, but there's something doesn't quite deliver on his movies besides Crazy Heart.
There's some, and I think the main thing, oddly enough, Crazy Heart is a movie with a lot of heart. And Out of the Furnace, Black Mass, and um,
Hostiles.
Jeez, I don't know why that. Jesus, yeah, are movies that the heart is there, but it's not. It's not as palpable as you would want it to be.
Out of the Furnace and Black Mass, I haven't seen Hostiles, but Out of the Furnace and Black Mass are very cold movies, which is fine because a movie can be very cold and be very good. But there doesn't, like you said, there's not that heart. There's not really a drive to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love revenge movies, and any revenge movie is only as good as its driving passion. Which I'll talk about Death Wish next week. That's why Death Wish was so fucking awful, is because it didn't have that through line of passion. And that's what Out of the Furnace was lacking, I think. And then Black Mass was kind of like a very, very hands-off, chilly crime drama.
Yeah, you know what? I think I understand where you're coming from on that. And oh my God, I'm sorry. As a total aside, so you're talking about Scott Cooper, and do you know Aaron Schneider? Have you heard that name?
Off the top of my head.
Okay, so Aaron Schneider is mostly he's like a cinematographer, is what he's done a lot of. He actually had a credit as a in a small role in one of Cooper's movies. I was just going through here. What, hold on, I'm trying to jump back to. Don't you love how IMDb sometimes goes in this thing where you can't get back to what you were looking at?
No.
It's pissing me off.
Scroll down to the very, very bottom. There's a whole list of previously looked at pages.
Yeah. Oh shit. I have literally never noticed that. Burp. All right, so back to what I was saying. Scott Cooper had a role as an actor in Aaron Schneider's movie Get Low.
Okay, yeah, Get Low is good.
Yeah, and the director of that movie, Aaron Schneider, he won an Oscar for his short film Two Soldiers way back in 2003, and he has not directed a movie since Get Low. But he has a movie coming out soon, and that movie called Greyhound is in pre-production right now.
I like the title.
It says here, a Navy officer commands the Greyhound during World War II. I don't know what the Greyhound means, whether it's like, I don't know, is he in charge of Greyhound buses or if the ship's called the Greyhound? But it stars Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks is credited as the writer of the movie as well.
Ooh.
Which, that's been a while.
What was the last movie he wrote, Larry Crown?
Oh, God. Yeah, I think so. But still,
really, he did. I just threw that out there.
I'm pretty sure he wrote Larry Crown.
Larry Crown is.
Let me verify that. Hold on.
Something that Tom Hanks fucking wrote.
Yes, unfortunately. But he also wrote an episode of Band of Brothers, an episode From the Earth to the Moon. That Thing You Do, I think, is an underrated movie. So there's that. But yeah, either way, it's a Tom Hanks movie, and the only other credited person in this movie is Stephen Graham, the British actor.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and he's in like Snatch. He's Tommy in Snatch, if you remember Tommy.
Yeah.
But he's in a lot of good stuff. I like him a lot. So that's a weird combination though, Tom Hanks and Stephen Graham. So I know this is a total aside. So what's your next?
My next, let's see, I had a couple. Let's see. Dunkirk.
Yeah, yep. That you know what? It didn't even make my honorable mentions, but I think I was remiss. I should have at least put it there.
Dunkirk's a pretty good movie that I probably don't need to see again.
Yeah,
it's really good, but it probably would be less good on a TV at my house.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't want to shame the honestly extraordinary technical achievements of that I try to say movie and film at the same time
So
of that film, but
I know that you're not someone who is as much of a fan of like war movies per se.
yeah.
And so in my case, I have seen a lot of them. I kind of grew up. There was sort of a thing. Me and my dad watching movies like that, and so I'm very familiar. And to me, Dunkirk was an accomplished but unremarkable ensemble cast war movie.
Yeah.
Now for those who may not be familiar with my personal definition of something, some of a term, I consider an ensemble cast war movie a war movie that doesn't have what you would call a conventional lead role, where it follows kind of multiple plot threads and multiple characters as they go about this larger operation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of movies that do that. The Longest Day, Bridge Too Far, Is Paris Burning, Midway. I could go on, but this is, it technically it's above and beyond any of these films. Huge step forward. So I got to give credit where credit's due for that. Story, though, in my opinion, the ensemble cast war film that takes the cake for that is A Bridge Too Far, Richard Attenborough's movie.
Yeah, that one's good.
And mostly because A Bridge Too Far plays like a series of short films set during one battle, one lengthy multiple day battle, and so there's all of these wonderful actors who get a great scene. And then when that scene's over, you get another great actor in an excellent scene. And Dunkirk has a few good scenes and a lot of it just doesn't build up the emotional impact as much as some of these others might do.
I think that it built the emotion in terms of the overall conflict rather than the actual characters, which is why I appreciated it, because a lot of war movies that kind of rub me the wrong way are like, oh, they're fighting for this country in this huge conflict, but Bobby has a drinking problem. And yeah, but I think Dunkirk was a lot more broad, which is why I think that movie touched me a lot more. It's like the final monologue was it's us as this body fighting this conflict. Mm-hmm. But I also agree with you too that it almost went a little too far in the other direction, where like you wouldn't know that's Tom Hardy in the plane unless you knew it was Tom Hardy in the plane.
Yeah, in its attempt to not focus on any specific characters, it ended up leaving you with very few characters to care about. Whereas, say, A Bridge Too Far it doesn't give any particular character a ton of airtime, but the time you spend with them feels like you've gotten to know them. A great example is at the very beginning of A Bridge Too Far, there's this brief moment where this one soldier's talking to James Caan, who's like his sergeant, and tells James Caan, he's sort of panicking because he's about to go into the battle for the first time, and he makes James Caan, under duress, basically promise him that he won't be killed.
Mm-hmm.
Later in the film, you haven't seen James Caan for over an hour and a half in the film. Suddenly he shows up again, and he finds the nearly dead body of the person he promised. He proceeds to drive to a hospital in a panic. And because of that one brief moment and Caan's performance, the way he sells it, you feel, even though you haven't seen much of this character, you can tell the drive that he has to get this done. And then when he gets to the hospital, the doctor says, no, he's too far gone. We can't do anything for him. After which point Caan threatens the doctor with a pistol. And, just things like that are memorable. I remember that scene because of how impactful it was, and how much of a human moment, because everyone has that person that they feel strong enough about that they would do that if they were in that circumstance. It's very universal. Right. Dunkirk, has a couple scenes that do that, but I can't say, I can't, with A Bridge Too Far, I could speak about that movie for days about all the individual scenes that do that for me. This did it. I would say 20% of the scenes in the film hit me like that.
Yeah, I think it's more of a spectacle than it is a character piece, which is
Yeah,
fine. But
and yeah, right. It's a spectacle, but a very effective one.
oh, totally. Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
one of my favorite. You know, I love that Roger Deakins won the Oscar, but one of the most striking shots of the film of Dunkirk was the skyline shot that suddenly twisted to the side in time with the plane.
yeah,
That just stuck with me. It's so fucking cool.
I will say though, the single best piece of cinematography involving the Battle of Dunkirk was Atonement.
Oh, with that just fucking 10,000 year long shot of just panning across the beach.
That establishing shot heard round the world. Joe Wright
Yeah.
nailed it.
Joe Wright's a good ass director. I mean, he's really good.
Yes, and Darkest Hour, of course, was also a movie with spectacular cinematography. I would say, for a movie that is essentially a series of scenes of people talking in rooms.
Mm. It's very visually effective.
Oh yeah, he makes it as dynamic as you could possibly make that. And that's, I got to give him credit, and also his cinematographer Bruno
Yeah,
Delbane. What, he's French, so however he pronounces it, I got no idea.
Bruno D.
Like Bruno S.
I would love
worked for Werner Herzog in a couple movies.
I would love to see Joe Wright direct a movie based on a graphic novel.
Yeah,
not a Marvel film, because I think they would hobnob him a little bit in terms of his style, but
yeah, not necessarily even a comic book graphic novel.
No, but like a real honest to God graphic novel. Like I don't know, like there's a few that I would like to see him do, but I think his style would lend itself well.
Okay, I'm about to throw something out here because I know you mentioned this the other day when we were talking about video games that could make good movies under the right circumstances. His Max Payne.
I didn't want to say it, but I was actually thinking Max Payne.
Okay. Well, it's one of those things where, I don't think that they're ever going to give it another shot, but...
Oh, I want them to, because the Max Payne movie was so fucking bad.
They fucking gave Hitman 2 terrible chances.
Yes.
So why not give Max Payne one more chance and put Joe Wright in charge? I agree. I think that would be a perfect... Because, first of all, Wright he's never done... I mean, I guess the closest might be Hannah in terms of like an action movie.
Yes, but Hannah was fucking dope.
Right. But even then, Hannah, it's almost an action drama because it's not like a balls to the wall movie. And yeah, I think he's got one in him, though.
Yes, he does, especially if they really let Max Payne get into the noir aspect. I think that noir would be a really good choice for Joe Wright. I mean, I just like everything he does. Even Pan, as much of a dumpster fire as that movie is, you could see that Joe Wright he was given a movie to make, and he's like, I'm going to do this job and do it as well as I can. And,
I think Anna Karenina was kind of a misfire for him. Visually, it's a really interesting movie. The problem is, while it's visually interesting, it tries to fit a Tolstoy story into just over 2 hours, and it really's got to be like 4 hours if you're going to tell Tolstoy right. And that's the problem, because Tolstoy was. It reminds me of Charles Dickens, where it's like you really, when it comes down to it, he was probably paid by the word.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe it reads better in Russian.
Probably.
Anyway, all right. Did you have any other movies to sign off with?
I just wanted to really, really quickly touch on the fact that 2017 was a good year for superhero movies besides Justice League.
Yeah.
But we had Logan, We had Guardians Part 2, Volume 2, rather. We
Hmm.
had Thor Ragnarok, and we had the Lego Batman movie.
And DC even bumbled into the broken watch of the series, Wonder Woman. They managed to be right once.
Yes, and Wonder Woman, of course. I almost forgot that was this past year.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the biggest two of those are probably Logan and Lego Batman.
Mm.
Um, Logan was a really, really good movie that I think had a couple of missteps in terms of plotting. Like, did they really need a Hugh Jackman doppelganger as the main antagonist?
Yeah, they could have figured something more creative out than that. I agree with you.
I think the whole like, oh, it's his feral side. Now he's nice, so it's bad. They fight, and like that was a little on the nose.
That really felt like an X-Men Origins Wolverine choice.
Yeah, it did.
Maybe the script started as something that bad, and then maybe that's why I was nominated for screenplay this year, because they knew what the original script was, and then they looked at the one that Logan became, and they said it is a coup that they managed to change it from garbage to
they really adapted this from a piece of shit.
this may be a polished turd, but this is the most polished turd I've ever seen. It's pristine.
This turd is pristine.
That's not to call the movie a turd, by the way.
No, not at all. Logan is really good, and I'll probably honestly watch that tonight. Now that
as a fan of westerns, I fucking love the fact that ending shot, which is beautiful in Logan, is a play on one of the earliest shots in towards the beginning of The Outlaw Josie Wales.
Yes.
And I was probably one of the only people who caught that, because I'm one of the crazy people who's actually seen a bunch of movies like The Outlaw Josie Wales. But
I just loved how bleak it was. There, like from the very beginning of Logan, there is this sense of finality to it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you do not get from the final film in a series very often.
Right, and it reminded me a lot of The Rover, in that it's a movie that's set on The Rover, and also the first Mad Max, where it's a movie set at the very edge of apocalypse. No, the apocalypse hasn't hit yet, but you can see it coming.
There's just this heaviness and this weariness to the world of Logan that I really dug.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the Lego Batman movie was just wacky as shit, and I adored it for that. I think the when I saw the Lego Batman movie in theaters, by a country mile, the adults were laughing harder and more often than the kids.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there were so many references to, like the Adam West Batman, which, by the way, also got to say, this is Batman and Two-Face, the Cape Crusaders movie.
Yep. And also, Adam West was excluded from the Oscars in Memoriam segment.
Yeah, that's
a shame. I liked how Lego Batman just took a number of just very, very casual but obvious digs at Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorites being Killer Croc going down to plant the bomb underneath Gotham. He was like, "Yay, I did something!" And
other people left out, by the way. I'm sorry. You mentioned In Memoriam. I just got to bring out Glenn Campbell.
Yep.
Toby Hooper.
Yes, Toby Hooper.
Yeah, I mean, there's always these glaring omissions, and you gotta wonder how the fuck they managed that.
I mean, like, do they have a guy on payroll? It's like, that guy died, put him on the lists. And
I mean, clearly they need to put more effort into this, because it's not that hard to put someone's picture up.
They did. I just think that Toby Hooper and Adam West were just ones where they just, with so many that they had to put in, they just forgot, which is really sad. But I think it's as simple as that.
Do you know how simple this is? Literally, I'm doing this right now. I'm typing deaths in 2017, and the first thing that comes up is Wikipedia lists of deaths by year. Jump to 2017, and what you get is a comprehensive list. And guess what? All you need to do in order to narrow it down to like actors is type the word actor and click, click for find and just go. And then director. I mean, you could manage this in I would say you could probably put a solid working list of passed away Academy members in about an hour's time.
Yeah, that's fair. That's true.
So the fact that names like that glaring were missing just is unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
Although I have to give props, Eddie Vedder's performance of Tom Petty's Room at the Top was both relevant and heartfelt.
Yes.
So anyway,
yeah, Lego Batman. It's really funny. The animation is great. Again, I think between all the other comic book films of the year, I'm looking at my list of my short list for the best movies of the year, and I actually had a question mark next to Lego Batman, which in that context meant, oh, is this really going to be a top 10? Like it could be, and then it wasn't. But it was my favorite. It was probably my favorite comic book movie of the year because it is immensely clever, and it's well animated and incredibly funny. And I think that its love that it has for the comic book lore is really astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
And the writing is really solid as well. Like even the little things where the guy goes to the through the security gate towards the beginning of the film,
mm-hmm.
and the guard is like, "Wow, he's so nice. I hope nothing bad happens to him." And then the guy is just driving around like, "Da da da, nothing bad is going to happen to me." And then he gets attacked by one of the villains. Like it's dumb humor, but it is so cleverly executed and so daringly executed that it's still a kid's film, but it's a fucking funny one.
Not only that, but this is kind of the ultimate Batman fan film in many ways. I have to say one thing, as a regular listener to Doug Benson's Doug Loves Movies podcast, he begins every time ever since The Dark Knight Rises has come out. Every time he starts the actual games part of the show, he does his Bane impression. Let the games begin.
And didn't Doug Benson voice Bane in the movie?
Yes. So that's what I'm calling it the ultimate fan film, because someone caught on to the fact that Benson's been doing the Bane for years and said, you know what? Let's give him Bane.
Which is totally a thing that the director Chris McKay would do, having directed a lot of Robot Chicken.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was actually really probably one of the biggest surprises of the movie was the action.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a really exciting movie.
Yeah, and well animated. That the Lego movie style where it's like kind of faux stop motion. I think works so perfectly for Lego because of the blocky nature of the toys. It just fits. Mm-hmm. It couldn't save the Lego Ninjago movie, but that's.
I still defend the Lego Ninjago movie as a lesser Lego film.
It was. Here's the thing. I've seen those straight to DVD meant for kids Lego movies. I've seen like 3 or 4 of them, and they're better than Ninjago.
I'm generally indifferent to Ninjago. It was fine. It is not anywhere near Batman or Lego movie.
It was just dull. I'm sorry, dull. And,
that's fair.
Just don't bore me, please.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I ask from a comedy. Yeah. Really, don't bore me.
Yeah.
That's why Hangover 3 fucked me up, because it was just dull. Retreading everything. And that's the problem.
Hangover 2 was retreading. Hangover 3 was a deliberate disengagement from that formula in a very bad way. Also very, very dull, though. I mean, it's way too dark.
Anyway, I don't want to get into a depressing
sure,
because this is
here's something happy though. We've done our Oscar talk. We've done our honorable mentions. Yesterday was the 20th anniversary of The Big Lebowski. I don't want to get into a long discussion about The Big Lebowski. It's just one of my favorite movies of all time, as it is for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a great movie. I mean,
the Coens have threatened a sequel for years.
I hope they don't do it, but I would trust them to make a good one.
You do realize, though, that that there's a completely the
Jesus movie. I know.
Yeah, there's a Jesus movie coming out with John Turturro, which
try not to think about.
I'm not gonna say right away that I'm gonna dismiss the movie.
A decade ago, I would have trusted John Turturro.
Yeah.
But then he was in a bunch of Transformers movies. And maybe it's like a David Cross thing where he was like, I fucking hate being in these movies, and he just handled it a little bit better than David Cross did in Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, where David Cross literally made a comedy bit of how he went out of his way to never get in another one of those movies ever again.
Yes. So we'll see what happens when that comes out. But the Coens are apparently okay with it, so maybe that's a good thing. But of course, the Coens kind of haven't directed The Big Lebowski, which is a movie that was engineered to be like a noir that goes nowhere. I think there's like not giving a fuck, but we'll see.
So, I don't really have any other topics to discuss tonight.
No, not really.
So we will go ahead and join next week with some new movie discussion.
Hurricane Heist.
The Oscar talk is done. We're over the hump, and we'll see how 2018 goes.
Yes.
It's too early to call so far.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take it easy.
Yeah, you too.